It seems to be a common misconception that tuning a drum and maintenance tuning of a drum is going to take a ton of time. It's going to be a whole endeavor. You got to set your whole day aside. And we're here to show you today what that can look like in real time if you've put in the time, practiced, and honed the skills. Whether you're dealing with your drum at home, teching a drum for somebody else, or even just in a drum shop, curious about one of the instruments that's there and whether or not it's right for you, the quicker you can assess a drum through tuning and adjustments, the less time you're going to have to spend doing everything else that goes into drums. These skills, for an awful lot of people out there, feel like they are insurmountable, deeply challenging, and ultimately not worth the time. Here we are to tell you unequivocally that if you take some time and work on these things, it doesn't have to take all day. Today, we're going to go through in real time my methodology of assessing, tuning up, and checking out a snare drum that maybe I've never seen before or perhaps just haven't played in a while and needs some maintenance. This is exactly what I do at home. This is exactly what I do when I tech a session. And this is also what I do when I'm considering purchasing a new drum that I can see in person. I'm going to interject in this process a little bit with some color commentary, but this is largely going to be in real time, and I've slowed it down a little bit for the purposes of video so that what I'm doing is clear to the viewer. Without further ado, let's jump right in. First thing I'm going to do is flip the drum over and take the snare wires off, because the very first head I want to work on is the snare side head. Next, I want to take all the tension off the snare side head, but before I do that, I'm going to use a Sharpie to mark on the head itself the lugs that are adjacent to the wires, just in case the head happens to spin at all, because we want to make sure that the orientation stays the same. For the purposes of today's demonstrations, we're sticking with the heads that are already on the drum, which means that there's an impression in the head from the snare beds, and we need that to stay in place for us to be able to tune this head back up. If this shifts, then we're going to run into troubles with the way that the collar has been shaped by the bearing edge and how that's going to affect being able to tune the head now. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's bring it back up to finger tight, and then I'm going to tune the head back up using a ruler. If time is of the essence, I will use a drill to reduce tension on drum heads sometimes, but I never use it to add tension because there's danger of damaging the head or possibly even stripping out the lug if you go too far too fast. Once I'm comfortable with the leveling of the snare side head and the tension feels good, I'm going to flip it over and start working on the batter head. The goal here is similar to what we did with the snare side, which is to say, reduce all of the tension, bring it back to finger tight, and then start pitching it up with 2 keys this time, but not all the way to the tension we're going for because we're going to be adding tension in the clearing process. One of the reasons why we take all that tension off of the heads in this case, beyond just being able to have a level playing field to start with, is to actually get a good idea of what sort of damage and wear is present on the heads, which may be invisible or unclear when there's tension on that head. This will inform everything we do after this and also tell us just what we can get away with in terms of tensioning, tuning, and the rest of it. It's always important to keep in mind expectation versus reality when tuning up a drum, particularly with heads that have already seen some use. We can get into a mode where we think that we're working with something that's going to get us a sound we need, when in reality, if it's wholly worn out, there's no way we're going to get that sound. Once we've brought the head up to a tension that's close to where we want to ultimately end up, it's time to start testing the pitch at each of the tension rod locations and clear the head by bringing up everything that's lower in pitch up to the highest one. I don't necessarily do this in a linear fashion, and I do it pretty quickly because I want to get where we're going as soon as we can. This is absolutely a product of having done this a lot, taken a lot of time to really get into exactly how to get there quickly, and using my ear every single time I sit down at the drum in order to get the sound I'm looking for. If it seems like this is going by really, really fast and is a lot faster than you might do at home, this is, again, from experience. And the more that you take the time and go slow, ultimately the faster you'll be, and it won't feel like a whole endeavor just to get your drum back in tune with itself. Now that the drum is sounding as in tune as I can get it with the state of this batter head, it's time to put the wires back on. Something that I like to do, especially if I'm reusing the mounting material, particularly with strings, is to make sure that there aren't any kinks or marks in it that could ultimately make the wires sit in an uneven way on the heads. I will actually stretch that string across the end of one of the tension rods and draw it back and forth to remove any kinks there might be so that it's effectively a fresh string again. Once the wires are reinstalled, I will check to make sure that they are both centered on the snare side head from side to side, and also that they are not twisted in any way that would result in uneven tension across the wires. At this point, we're at the end. Flip the drum back over and it's ready to play, and also to make any micro adjustments to the tuning now that everything is back on and you can hear the complete sound of the instrument. And there you have it. not a ton of time, and now I have a really good idea of what this drum sounds like in a general sense, and also equally importantly, the state of the heads, the wires, and what it's capable of with exactly what's on it. It's worth noting that we don't all have extra heads lying around, and we don't all have the budget to be buying new heads and wires all the time. So being able to assess a drum with the heads that are on it, no matter the state of them, is an important skill to have. This includes assessing if the heads or wires need to be changed as well. You know, they don't last forever, but being able to use your ears to understand that is a very, very important skill. Every single time that I go into a drum shop, I see used drums that have very worn heads on them and sometimes very worn or bent wires as well. This is functionally a drum that is not ready for performance that's being sold to you to use. And it's also worth being able to assess those things in real time in the store so that maybe you can negotiate fresh heads or wires into the purchase price of that drum because the shop clearly hasn't taken that into account as a factor that would matter to you. I will also tell you that I've more than once in my life retuned a drum that I saw someone considering in a store after they said it was terrible, and then shown it to them again, friends, strangers, and had them not realize that it was the same drum because they did not even consider the idea that it was a good sounding drum. They simply held it up, hit it, said, "That drum sounds terrible," put it down and moved on. It's easy to watch our videos and other tuning videos on the internet and think that they are only about learning how to tune a drum to sound great for some certain situation or how to manage some issue you might have with a drum, but never forget that there's also a whole other side of it, which is just understanding what's happening with that drum, understanding what's happening with the heads, and understanding if it's the right drum for the situation that you're in. Remember as you go through all of these things that we do here that tuning like this is not a high-minded thing that you only do some of the time. It's on-the-ground skills that will serve you in rehearsals, practice spaces, your own drums, recording studios, and help you get everything out of those drums as quickly as possible.